Jesus in Egypt? We know from the Gospel of Matthew that the Holy Family fled to Egypt to escape Herod. But Matthew gives us very little information about their time there, simply telling us that they remained until Herod's death and then returned to Judea. Some modern scholars have argued that the flight to Egypt was a Christian invention to fulfill the Old Testament prophecy of Hosea. I called my son out of Egypt. However, the more interesting prophecy to me comes from Isaiah. Cities 5 there shall be in the land of Egypt that talk with the speech of Canaan, and take oaths in the name of the Lord of hosts, a city that bears the Son's name among them. Thus the Lord will reveal himself to Egypt. The Egyptians, when that day comes, will acknowledge him, doing him worship with sacrifices and offerings, will make vows to the Lord and perform them. I'll explain why this becomes very important later on in the video. Interestingly, the Roman philosopher Celsus, in his attack against Christianity, claimed that Jesus had gone to Egypt as a youth where he learned magical arts. Early Jewish attacks of Christianity made similar claims. But, does this prove Jesus actually went to Egypt? No. It does, however, show that the tradition of Jesus spending time there was not a later Christian development. It was already known to Christian writers and their critics from an early date. So, if they were in Egypt, what were they doing there? How long did they stay? And did anything miraculous take place? These questions are addressed by a number of mystics and apocryphal sources. By comparing these accounts, perhaps we could uncover the true narrative of what took place in Egypt. So, I've juxtaposed different versions of Jesus' time in Egypt, which are the 2 apocryphal Gospels of Pseudo-Matthew and the Arabic Infancy Gospel, the 3 visions from Mary to Patriarch Theophilus of Alexandria, Blessed Maria of Agreda, and Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich, and lastly, the official narrative of the Coptic Church, which you should know is heavily modeled on the Theophilin vision. Before we go on, I really need your support to continue making projects like this. If you have the means, please consider purchasing one of my handmade rosaries to help fund the production of future videos. The rosary is a traditional Christian prayer that meditates on the major events in the lives of Jesus and Mary through a series of mysteries rooted in Scripture. They are all made entirely by me using premium materials purchased from a local shop, so each one is built to last a lifetime. The red and blue beads are the traditional Marian colors in art for both East and West, representing heaven and earth respectively. Since I make every rosary by hand and have a tight budget, I can only produce a limited number, so once the batch is gone, that's it for the time being. Every purchase directly helps make more projects like this possible, so please click the link in the description to buy your rosary today. You can also support through Patreon to get ad-free viewing, sources, private chats, and more. God bless. Now back into the video. Unfortunately, having read all the various accounts, there simply is not a cohesive through line. None of them appear to agree on even the simplest of travel facts. The seemingly only thing they do agree on are the details given in Matthew, that Joseph received a dream, so they fled to avoid Herod and returned to Nazareth, that they had divine help traveling to Egypt, and that they performed many miracles while in Egypt, destroying idols, temples, and teaching the Egyptians to worship the true God. That's it. Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich doesn't even agree that they departed from Bethlehem, instead placing their departure in Nazareth, lining up with a lesser-held interpretation about Luke 2:39, that they returned to Nazareth after the presentation. So, if none of these accounts agree on pretty much anything, either one of them is true and the rest are all rubbish, or they're all just hogwash, right? Not exactly. None of the accounts claim to be the entire story. So, just as the 4 Gospels focus on different parts of Jesus' ministry, it could be something similar here. Plus, look at all the various versions laid on a map. Are you starting to see a different picture? I certainly did once it was mapped out. Let's start with what they do agree on. The Holy Family gathered their basic necessities and fled through the Sinai Desert to reach Egypt. Speaking of packing lightly, you need to learn about the airless vacuum kit. You pack your clothes in, zip it shut, and use this little USB-C rechargeable pump or your vacuum cleaner at home to suck in all the air out. I'm not exaggerating, this gets like 60% more space in your suitcase, backpack, whatever you're using. I fit way more in than I should be able to, and it's still not bulky. The bags themselves are carry-on sized, fit 15 plus clothing items, and are made with this anti-rip nylon so they hold up trip after trip. And they're fully sealed so your clothes can stay dry and don't pick up odors. If you travel a lot, this is how you skip checked bag fees. Everything just fits in your carry-on now. They come in 1, 2, and 4 packs, with or without the pump, so you can grab whatever makes sense for you. I really wish I'd had this for my recent trip to Europe. It would have saved me a few $100 in baggage fees, so I really recommend this to you. Use my code VD10 to get an extra 10% off the existing sale on the website. It's automatically applied through the link in the description and pinned comment. Now, back into the video. While most agree on a few cities that they probably went through, such as Giza or Pelusium, there is no consensus route. However, when examining the tales of what took place on this arduous journey across the desert, they all agree that the Holy Family received some form of divine assistance, mostly either food or drink. The stories that address this part of the journey also agree that angels watched over and protected them. But it goes further than this. The Gospel of Pseudo-Matthew mentions that lions and panthers adored Jesus, accompanying him and showing him the path through the wilderness. Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich's version included something similar, with several wild lions acting as guide dogs to show them the path through a tough mountain pass. Before we continue into Egypt, keep in mind, Egyptian society lasted for over 3,000 years by this point. We're closer to Jesus than Jesus was to the foundation of Egyptian society. So, their mythology and religion was a bit messy, to say the least, with different eras and dynasties pushing different myths and deities. Even different cities had their own mythology, so there was not one universal through line that Egypt ever attempted to form, like Hesiod did in the Theogony or the Greeks. To put it simply, there were 4 major creation myths prevalent in Egypt, crediting creation to either Atum, Ptah, the Ogdoad, or Amun. As we will see, Jesus disproved all 4 by his journeys across the Nile. While all accounts do agree the Holy Family obviously came through the desert to reach Egypt, one location within Egypt stands out as you cross-reference all the stories: Heliopolis. Upon first glance, it doesn't really make much sense why they would go there out of all of Egypt. Alexandria was the greatest city in the world, according to Mark the Simp Antony, and likely had the largest Jewish population of any city behind only Jerusalem. Memphis, Babylon, yes, Egypt had their own Babylon, Hermopolis, Oxyrhynchus, Heracleopolis Magna, and other cities were all larger. So, what gives? Heliopolis. Now, that is obviously a Latinized form of the Greek, Heliopolis. Remember, Egypt had been ruled by the Greek Ptolemies for nearly 300 years, until Augustus. Anyhow, Heliopolis means City of the Sun, and was identified with the Hellenistic solar deity and personification of the sun, Helios. Well, 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 that certainly sounds like a certain city that bears the sun's name Isaiah was talking about 700 years before. The Greeks did this because in the native Egyptian tongue, it was known as Iunu. Apologies for my non-existent ancient Egyptian skills. It meant the pillars. But, more importantly for us, the city was also known as the House of Ra, the Egyptian sun god, and the first pharaoh. Ra was very important across Egypt for governing in all parts of creation, the realm of the dead, the earth, and the heavens. While other gods such as Amun, Horus, and Osiris had risen in prominence by this time, he was still responsible for creating life. The other deity, Atum, whose cult centered in Heliopolis, was just as crucial. Atum is perhaps the oldest creator deity across all of Egyptian mythology, and might even predate Egypt itself. The creation mythos of Heliopolis is likely the oldest and most cemented across the land of pharaohs, with their cult holding much influence. Is it not then fitting that nearly all accounts emphasize Jesus' time in Heliopolis, perhaps the most entrenched stronghold of paganism, and therefore chief demonic city on the Nile? While the accounts differ on the exact details, they paint a very similar picture of demons being cast out. Powerful ones. Blessed Maria said this was where the main wonders took place. When they arrived after wandering through Egypt for a long while, they found work while the idols and temples of the city collapsed and the mere presence of Jesus and Mary. Once the people saw her, she taught them about God and the demons, curing the sick and other miracles. Lucifer himself came to the city as he was outraged that so many of his demonic idols and temples had been destroyed across Egypt during the travels of the Holy Family. So he riled up for war against Mary, as Jesus was hidden from him, but he was unable to get close to her before being hurled back to hell. Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich's account included how an ox-headed idol was toppled by an earthquake when they just arrived in the city, and included many other idols being overturned, so they could work together. However, another detail she included is perhaps the most fascinating of any of the visions. Curiously, she described how the local Jews had a mixed-up theology, not properly having distinctions between men and women. Nearly 100 years after she passed away, Egyptologists uncovered an inscription of the Jewish temple in Leontopolis, just outside Heliopolis, that mentions Maren the priestess. Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich was the first to ever make any comments about mixed-up gender roles compared to this local Jewish temple to the one in Jerusalem. Neither Josephus nor Philo of Alexandria ever made such claims. So, perhaps there was some supernatural gifts to her visions. But this isn't conclusive. Memphis was the next major city that was mentioned in 3 accounts, but we don't have many specifics. The Arabic infancy gospel gives us our only real detail. Thence they came down to Memphis and saw Pharaoh, and remained 3 years in Egypt, and the Lord Jesus did in Egypt very many miracles, which are recorded neither in the Gospel of the Infancy nor in the Perfect Gospel. It is well documented that there was no Pharaoh of Egypt by this time, so this could have been either a local administrator, or, more interesting, and likely, in my opinion, a reference to the colossal statue of Ramses the Great that still would have loomed large at the Temple of Ptah. By this point, Memphis was no longer the center of Egypt, so why would they go there? Undoubtedly for the same reason as Heliopolis. Although we don't know what events transpired here, many idols and temples would have been torn down as demons were banished back to hell. The god Ptah was another creator deity for Egypt, with his cult centered in Memphis, going back thousands of years. According to his cult, he gave life to all the gods and their souls as well, through this heart and this tongue. But how? By breathing life into creation. Perhaps a demonic mockery of God's actual creation of the universe, breathing life into Adam. So, it is fitting that this other ancient center was visited by the one true God, disproving the machinations of their false idols by tearing them down. The last major city that we have multiple sources for the Holy Family is Hermopolis. Just like Heliopolis and Memphis, Hermopolis had its own creation myths. However, it was unique amidst Egypt, as creation was not the work of one being, but the Ogdoad, a group of 8 gods, 4 male, Nu, Heh, Kek, and Amun, and 4 female, Naunet, Huet, Kalket, and Amunet. The Gospel of Pseudo-Matthew said that when they entered the city, the Holy Family came into a massive pagan temple, which likely would have been the sprawling Temple of Thoth. This temple gave the Greeks the name for the city, as they associated Hermes with Thoth, so it naturally became Hermopolis, the city of Hermes. The temple had idols for each day of the year, and they all prostrated themselves towards Jesus and Mary, shattering their faces. Aphrodosius, the governor, brought his troops to the temple when he heard about this commotion. The demonic priest thought he would punish the strange foreigners, but instead he blessed them. Their god must be the god of gods, because the idols prostrated themselves before them. Mary then taught the people as they began to follow God. Blessed Maria's vision included that there were numerous powerful demonic idols in the city, and that one resided in a great tree at the city's entrance. When Jesus drew near, the demons were hurled out, and the tree bent down in homage of God. By humiliating the Ogdoad, both the creation myth of Hermopolis and Thebes were disproven. Amun, a member of the Ogdoad, was considered the chief god and creator for Thebes. But how could this be if he and his other idols were destroyed and humiliated by the true god? While these three cities were the major ones that had multiple accounts for the Holy Family visiting them, there are also too many mentions of Matarea to ignore. The Arabic Infancy Gospel, the three different visions, and the Coptic account mention this seemingly unimportant town. The duration of their stay differs depending on the source, but they seem to agree that some miraculous well sprung out, and it is still revered by the local Coptic population to this day. So, it's safe to say that they came to this village. There are a few other interesting parallels you can find between various accounts, including meeting the future thieves on the cross at Calvary, fruit trees bending down for Mary to pick their fruit, encounters with massive dragon-like reptiles, etc. But I encourage you to read them all yourselves and see what parallels you find that I might have missed. Ultimately, the likely path would have looked something like this. They fled Judea, passing through Giza into the Sinai, before reaching Pelusium. From there, they traversed down the Nile, stopping in Heliopolis, Matarea, Memphis, and Hermopolis, before taking a similar path back to Israel. If you ask the Ethiopian church, they actually came down to Ethiopia, so they also likely would have gone through Thebes, though this is a later Ethiopian tradition and is pretty unlikely. Either way, while in Egypt, many temples and idols were destroyed, as the various creation myths were all proven false, with Mary teaching the locals about the one true God. The four separate demons claiming God's role as the creator of the universe were humbled and expelled back to hell, their powers vanquished. With the groundwork set for Egypt's future Christianization, the Holy Family returned home, fulfilling the prophecies of Hosea and Isaiah. Let me know your thoughts on what they're doing down in Egypt. Let me know your thoughts on what they were doing in Egypt down below, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to buy your airless vacuum bags in either the pinned comment or description, and also check out one of my rosaries if you're interested. God bless.